Hi friends, thank you for tuning in to the Concussion Coach podcast. I'm Bethany Lewis, the Concussion Coach. I'm a neurological occupational therapist and certified life coach, and I specialize in guiding people through their concussion recovery journey. I am passionate about helping people understand their injury, speed up their recovery, and reclaim control over their life post-concussion. The purpose of this podcast is to help increase awareness of concussions and the impact they can have on a person's life, and to bring hope to people who have suffered a concussion and those who love them. I firmly believe that sharing stories and knowledge about concussions will bring important light and understanding to this misunderstood and often invisible injury. The information in this podcast is meant to bring that awareness and hope and is not meant as medical advice. The opinions shared are those of the interviewees and my own. If you are suffering with lingering concussion symptoms, I have created a concussion coaching program specifically for you. I will be your mentor to guide you through your recovery journey, offering help with understanding and managing your symptoms, setting achievable goals, and learning how to manage your own thoughts and nervous system in order to get control over your life again. If this program sounds like something that would help you or someone you love, sign up for a free consultation. In the consultation, you'll get valuable information and resources and gain hope for your future. Sign up for your free consultation at the link in the show notes or at my website, www.theconcussioncoach.com. Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Concussion Coach podcast. Today's episode is going to be quite different than the others because it's an intro to me podcast. If you remember back on episode 52, I interviewed the fabulous Taya James in an interview that made my heart so happy. She's an amazing human. You should totally go back and listen to it if you haven't heard it yet. And at the end of our conversation, after we'd stopped recording, she said that she was interested in hearing more of my story and how I came to be doing what I'm doing, and offered to interview me so I could put my story out there as well. And I thought that was so sweet of her and thought I would take her up on it. There have been a couple of people who've said that they'd like to hear more about how I got into doing this. So if you're interested, here's my story. And Taya's here and so sweet. And so I'm just going to turn the time over to her so she can ask me questions and we'll see how this conversation goes. Thanks for being here, Taya.
I'm so excited to be here. And thank you for letting me play the Uno reverse card and interview you.
Yes. I love it.
I am really interested, first and foremost, like you do so many things in the concussion space and you show up in such a beautiful manner. Like, was occupational therapy something you wanted to be when you were a child? What did that look like?
Oh, great question. I actually had no idea what occupational therapy was until I was like well into college. I didn't know what I wanted to be. I thought maybe a nurse. I thought maybe I remember going and shadowing early in college. I observed nursing. I observed physical therapy. I observed teaching. I just thought all of those things. I liked helping people. I know I liked wanting to work with people, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I even had, it's funny, I remember being exposed to occupational therapy in high school because one of my good friends said that she wanted to be an occupational therapist. And I asked her about it. It's like, oh, that's cool. What is that? I've never heard of it before. And I am sure that she described it much better than this, but all I got out of her explanation was that she was going to help people hold their spoons. And I was very confused. I was like, what? Okay, you go have fun with that. That's so weird. But I didn't really, wasn't interested in it at that point. And then, yeah, right. I was like, you hold spoons. And I mean, to be fair, OTs do help people hold spoons sometimes. That can be a thing that we help people with, but that's definitely not the main bulk of what we do. So, but it wasn't until I actually got to serve a mission for my church in Australia.
Wow.
It makes my heart very happy to hear your accent because again, I think it reminds me of where I spent some time. And while I was there, I was visiting the home of somebody and she had people coming over and working with her baby. Like they were playing on the floor. I think it was a child development specialist and an occupational therapist and doing early intervention. And I watched them playing with this baby. And I was like, wait, they're getting paid to play with a really cute baby. And then they're helping the baby progress in their developmental milestones at the same time. This is the coolest thing I've ever heard. So that's how I got interested in OT. And the more I learned about it, the more it just seemed like a perfect combination of working individually with people and the psychology piece of it and the creativity piece and just there's a lot of the medical piece. There's a lot that was really interesting to me. And when I found out that you could work with all kinds of different populations. Like choosing occupational therapy wasn't like, you still had so many choices available to you. Like it didn't feel like I was narrowing too much. Was very appealing to me because I had trouble making decisions. So I was like, oh, this is the perfect one. I will do this. And then I can still have lots of options available. So yeah, so that's kind of how I got into OT in the first place. I thought that I was going to want to work with kids and do pediatrics, and I do, obviously, I love kids, but I haven't. Most of my career has been in working with adults and now with concussion patients who are, can be children, but mostly teenagers to adults. So yeah, that's kind of how I got into it.
That's so cool. And it sounds like there were kind of little pieces along your journey, which was like occupational therapy, and then slowly layered and integrated.
Yeah.
But like you say, that diversity, there's so many different roles, workplaces, settings, and walks of life that you have the opportunity to contribute to, that I can see for, that younger version of yourself looking at where to go.
Yes.
Still meeting that helping people and creativity piece. That's really cool.
It's good. I'm so grateful for it. Like I've signed up. I get to every once in a while I'll have students from the school that my undergrad will call because I'm on some lists. So if they're interested in doing occupational therapy, they'll call me up and I'll chat with them about it. And I always tell them it was so perfect for me. I'm so grateful for it because it's been very flexible and it's something that I love. I'm very passionate about it. I do love the people that I've gotten to meet through it. And it's been very fulfilling, but it's also a perfect job. It's been perfect for me as a mom because that's my main priority. And so it's fit in well everywhere we've lived, including in China. I got to find a place, like I was able to find work everywhere. We've lived in multiple states and 2 countries. And yeah, I've been able to find work and fit it in with as a secondary piece or sometimes there was a period where I was the main provider for our family while my husband was trying to start a business. So it's been a huge blessing for our family and just for me individually. I've really enjoyed it and been grateful for it.
That's so beautiful and also so cool for me personally as a 28-year-old currently doing a master's in speech and language pathology, looking out forward to life. It's cool to hear that it served you in that way because similarly, my family and those pieces to me are number one. And then, career and being able to help people is also very important, but lovely to see how they can work in.
Yes. Yeah, it is. I think the therapies are a great option for people who want to have that kind of flexibility. It's been really wonderful.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And so how and when and why did concussion pique your interest then?
Yes. So when I was working full-time during that period when I was supporting our family, I came across a guy who was doing PRN. So he would kind of come in as a substitute therapist if people were the regular therapists weren't available. He would sometimes come in and sub at the place that I worked. And so I met him. His name is Nate Pope. I actually just posted my interview with him today. So if anybody wants to do it, they can check that episode out. But he mentioned in passing, I guess, this brain clinic that he worked at. And he was telling me a little bit about it, that they work with people with concussions. And I don't know, just the things that he would talk about and the changes that people were able to make and the brain stuff. I don't know. I was just fascinated by it. And every time he would come in, I'd corner him and be like, okay, tell me more. Tell me more about this clinic that you work at. And eventually he came in and he said that they were looking to hire another OT. And I was very interested and got the opportunity to work there. So I've been working at this clinic. It's called Cognitive FX and it's in Provo, Utah. And so I started working there in January of 2017. So it's been a little bit over 7 years at this point. And I didn't realize before starting there, I had no idea about concussions. We did learn about it a little bit. We had very, very brief lesson on it in college or in OT school. But yeah, nothing in depth, nothing like what I learned by working there and seeing people and hearing their stories. It was shocking to me how impactful it could be. For one, I had no idea that it could completely turn somebody's life upside down. And here it was being called a mild traumatic brain injury. It wasn't you hear concussion and you're like, oh yeah, don't fall asleep or something. And then in a couple of weeks, you'll be fine. That's all people tend to know about concussions. But then, yeah, just to see the impact that it could have on people and then to see that the treatment that we were doing at this clinic was so effective. Like that was very rewarding as an OT, and you might experience this as a speech therapist too. Sometimes in certain settings, the progress can be very slow going, and it can be challenging. And depending again on the setting and stuff, like sometimes people are more or less than motivated to be doing the therapy and the exercises. And so, but at this clinic, the people who were coming were usually paying out of pocket and were very motivated. They wanted to get back they wanted their lives back. And with the team effort that was going into this, I don't know, it was very rewarding to see within a week people's improvement. So it was really cool to be a part of that and to learn about concussions and the brain and neuroplasticity and all of the cool things that make such a difference for so many people. That's how concussion happened. That's where I started getting into it and learning about it and getting very passionate about it.
Cool. So sort of similar to occupational therapy, like concussion sounds like it found you and invited you in.
Yeah. I like that. I guess that is true. Because it was definitely not on my radar. It wasn't something that I was necessarily looking at or interested in prior to. It just kind of followed the interest level. And I'm really grateful for how it's turned out so far. It's such a cool.
You mentioned when you first sort of heard about concussion and occupational therapy, how interested you were in it. What do you think sparked that interest if there wasn't necessarily like a personal connection to it? What do you feel like pulled you in?
I think it was the things that he was talking about regarding how the brain can change, that the neuroplasticity piece of like being able to see changes. And especially, I don't know, I was working in a skilled nursing setting. So there were a lot of, people dealing with strokes and I don't know, a lot of different more physically, how do I say this? Obvious
physical challenges
physical challenges. Yeah. But even like hearing about how much the brain could change, and even, I think it also strokes. Like there's so many things that we can apply this like idea of the ability of the brain and the body to change. I don't know. It was very fascinating to me. And the cognitive piece, just all of it. I don't know. It was just really, for some reason, again, the brain is fascinating to me. And I don't think I realized how fascinated I was by it until I started talking to him. And then the more I learned about it, the more I was like, oh my gosh, this is the coolest thing ever. Yeah. So I listened to this book. When I started working there, they had recommended the book, The Brain's Way of Healing and The Brain That Changes Itself. I don't know if you've read those before. They're by Norman Doidge. Have you heard
of them? But I haven't read them yet.
Okay. So I would listen to them, and on my drive back and forth, and I would come home. I just remember being like, I come home from work and just kind of like bust through the door and be like, everybody has to read that. It's amazing. Like, the brain is so cool. The body is so cool. So I was very passionate about it. But yeah, the more I learned about the brain, the more I was amazed by it and just really excited at the possibilities, especially because I feel like it was, again, I hadn't heard a lot about this prior to, like, neuroplasticity was new-ish. Like it wasn't as big as it is now. It's not like people didn't know as much. And so learning about it was just fascinating and really exciting to me.
Did you find anything hard along your learning journey around concussion?
Ooh, that's a good question. What was hard about? I mean,
personally or professionally?
I think something that was very frustrating was just hearing so much about how much the medical community was so far behind. We were still telling people to cocoon and to go in a dark closet and not get any stimulation at all. I think that's still challenging for me to hear. I'm like, oh no, I think it is changing. Things are getting better, and that's really good. But that was frustrating. And I needed to learn a lot. I didn't feel like I came into it not knowing very much at all. And so that's challenging, but a challenge that I love. I'm a really big nerd and I really like learning things. So it was a good hard, but yeah, I think that's what comes to mind when you ask that.
Oh, that's beautiful. I can really relate to being a nerd, particularly a brain nerd. Also, I was getting like a little bit emotional almost just when you were talking about your learning journey around concussion, and just so nice as from a client patient perspective to see a clinician so excited and fueled and like genuinely just really wanting to hear and help is so cool. So like, thank you for just showing up. I know it's authentic to you, but it's just such a blessing. It's so cool to have clinicians like yourself championing that for those of us that are on the client side.
Oh, that's thank you for saying that. That's surprising to me to hear, but very gratifying. I appreciate that. And I love that you're doing this too. Like, I think it's so great to have one that people who have suffered a brain injury can recover. Again, that's what I'm passionate about, is like their healing is possible. And so many times people were told that it wasn't, just get used to this, your new normal. So one, I love that you can find healing, and then that you can turn around and use what you've learned to help so many other people through it. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. So I'm glad that we get to do this together.
I almost knocked over my cup of tea. So excited. No, absolutely. And that's received with so much gratitude. And I think, you use the word healing. And I think for me in my journey, like healing can look so different in different areas. So even within myself, so healing in my balance might look very different to healing in my speech or healing in my cognition. And to me, healing isn't necessarily 100% recovered. There are some areas that maybe won't get there, but healing is learning different compensation strategies, finding different interests, finding different places I bring value and purpose. And that's been really beautiful. And it's like health professionals like yourself that, for me in my road, are so impactful in what that healing looks like.
I appreciate that you said that. I think it's important for people to hear that perspective too, because healing, when I say healing is possible, I mean that. Like that healing is possible, but it, like you said, it can look different, and it may, I don't know, it turns into something really beautiful, regardless of how, like, to what degree of quote unquote healing or like back to normal or whatever. Like it depends on every individual injury, every, like, all the things. and I think regardless of whether you've had a brain injury or not, we're constantly improving and working on ourselves, and like things are changing, and I think that's, anyway, I think that's important. So
definitely. And like I like to just keep working on that improvement personally, because that gives me hope and that gives me purpose to step through. But sometimes things take a really long time. It might be 3 years down the track that I'm in a new situation, like, oh my gosh, I'm not needing sunglasses in this situation, or wow, I'm not needing earplugs right now. This is such a win, but it didn't necessarily happen for me in that week.
Yes.
Healing can be such a funny fish, but there can be so much beauty in and amongst it.
Amen. That was beautifully put. Thank you for saying that. Yeah, so important for people to hear.
So, okay, so we've sort of dabbled around that occupational therapy piece and how you got into the concussion space. And now I'm interested, how did that also spark this curiosity around coaching, and what is coaching to you?
Oh, great question. Thank you. What is coaching to me? So I guess, because coaching is so broad. And when I first heard about life coaching, I was like, people are like paying people to be their friends and listen to them. What is that? I was so skeptical. So it's really funny to me that this is like a huge passion for me now. But I started listening to a woman named Jody Moore. I don't know if you've heard of her or not, but she has a podcast called Better Than Happy. And I listened to her podcast for a few years, actually, before I decided that I wanted to do this thing. But I feel like I've been blessed with a fairly stable personality and fairly positive and optimistic. Like, that's just kind of how I came. It's been easy for me to see the silver lining in things and just look at, I don't know. I feel like I've been pretty lucky that way. But listening to this podcast and like hearing some of the ways that a lot of what she talks about is working with your thoughts, and like how much the thoughts impact your feelings and your actions and the results that you find in your life, and how the circumstances of our lives are not what determines how we feel and who we become. It's the power of our mind and our thoughts, which I really love that concept. But she would talk about things, and I would agree with most of it, and then I would like I would fight back in my mind about a lot of things. But as I listened and as I tried implementing things, I just realized a lot. I agreed with more than what I thought I did with what she was saying. And I feel like it up-leveled my emotional stability, the way that I thought about the world and thought about life and interrelationships, things. Like, it just really gave me a lot of perspective that I found very helpful and felt life-changing to me. And so she did a week-long, in-depth, like, immersive coaching experience that I, at the last minute, joined in on. And after, like, through that, just watching coaching over and over and over again, I was just like, it felt like a calling almost. I was just like, I know that I can do this. I know that I can be good at this. I feel so drawn to it. I just felt so passionate about it. Like, it felt very much like, yeah, kind of like, this is the path. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. I just knew it and was really excited about it, but didn't quite know how to go about it. And while I was there, I met a few people who opened opportunities for me to learn more. And then I was, about coaching. And then I was able to have the opportunity to do a coach certification through the Life Coach School with Brooke Castillo. I met some really wonderful people through that. It's cool to see how things have progressed. Because I had actually negative interest. I was actively not interested in being an entrepreneur and like doing my own thing. My husband, he's very entrepreneurial minded, and he would always say, you should do occupational therapy on your own and like do all the stuff. And I was like, no, thank you. I do not want that at all. But now, like, with this, it just feels like this is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. I just feel very passionate about it, and I really, really love it. So anyway, I got certified and started even before I finished my certification, because you don't have to have a certification to do life coaching, which is, on one hand, I can see why people are skeptical of it. And I had somebody make a comment like, oh, so you're like a therapist without a license, like a psychologist without a license. I'm like, I don't know. That's hard for me to hear, because I had those doubts about it myself. Like, anyway, there's a lot. I had a lot of like thought work to do about it, but the difference that I see it making for people is like worth it. And I feel like I know what my boundaries are. Like, I'm happy to refer people and tell them, hey, you should probably speak to a therapist, a trained like psychologist or psychiatrist if we're getting into these things. But there's so much that we can talk about and that I think is helpful for everybody about, again, being aware of our thoughts. And yeah. And so as I've gone through it, I initially started off doing life or family relationships coaching. That was kind of what a lot of people were bringing to me. And that's what I really enjoy. I love relationships. I love people. And so I was like, if I can help people with that, that'd be great. And that's when I started my podcast and did it for like one podcast a month for a year. That was my goal, because it felt so overwhelming because I have a bunch of kids. It just was like, this is like technically a side thing, but it could take up a lot more of my time. So anyway, I had to figure it out. And then about a year in, I felt again, kind of guided, opportunities opened that made sense to try to focus it more in on concussion specifically. And I kind of went kicking and screaming, to be honest. For some reason, I wanted to keep them separate. I wanted to do coaching and work with family relationships. And still love concussions, but I don't know. I felt it took me a little while and like a lot of pondering and prayer and trying to figure things out. But once I finally got on board, it was like the best thing ever. I do really love the concussion coaching specifically. And it's like a combination of things that I am very passionate about and really love. So it's gotten me into this space and getting to meet people like you. And it's just the best. I love it so much. And I decided to go ahead and try to do a podcast every week. And that's been really a cool experience too, because again, I love putting information out there that I hope will be helpful for people and is free, and putting quality, real information about concussions out there is important to me. And then I get to meet people and learn from people. So it's been a really cool journey, and I'm excited to keep going with it and see what happens.
Yeah. And also just like taking a moment to celebrate and acknowledge you as well, because as a content creator personally, content takes so much more time than you could ever imagine until you try to do it yourself. Like, it is absurd the amount of energy that will go into a 45-second, 1-minute video. And so, you know, to be producing one podcast episode a week, like, I am in awe for just the amount of energy you put in. Obviously, it's something that is so valuable to you that energy and capacity is worthwhile. So just thank you and well done.
Thank you. That means a lot to me. And I to be fair though, it's funny because I feel like I have to, if it was me, some people do podcasts on their own. They just like talk into a microphone and just share their wisdom. And that would take me so much longer than I like, because I love talking to people. The interview thing works so well for me. I love it. I'm like, oh, I want to hear all these things about this person. And like, I have all these questions. So it does take time to like come up with the questions and to actually do like set it all up. It does take time. But it feels like a lot less time than it would if I was trying to like even come up with like a 17-minute solo episode. It feels like it's so much more effort and time. So I think finding what you're passionate about definitely helps. But,
which seems to be singing through a lot, right? But yeah, playing on those strengths, playing on those curiosities, and just diving in on those. And for around like concussion coaching, what are some nuances you feel specific to the concussion coach population versus, say, your standard coaching that people might envisage?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think the first thing that comes to mind is, and I think actually this is applicable to everybody, but for me, it's been very impactful when I started learning more about the nervous system specifically. I did a training with a woman named Leah Davidson specifically about the nervous system resilience and like how to help people. And she's a speech language pathologist and
love her.
Yes. And she's also worked with people with traumatic brain injuries for years, like even before she became a coach and doing this stuff. So she and I had a lot in common and got along very well right from the beginning. I've actually done a couple podcast episodes with her as well. So if people want to hear her wisdom, they could totally check that out. But that piece was huge. And I wish that I had learned it earlier, because I think I have specific clients in mind that I'm like, oh, I wish I'd known this when I was working with you, because it would have changed the way that I approach things. Because that's kind of the first thing that I talk about is let's work on nervous system regulation, and then we can work on thought work, because I do feel like it's very important and it is a missing piece. You know, people dealing with concussions, there's so much physically, but so much emotionally and mentally that goes along with it. And then family relationship stuff, like there's so much life is continuing and life is still hard. It's just, that much harder when you're dealing with it with a brain injury. And so yeah, I feel like pulling in the pieces of what I already know is helpful, but recognizing that the importance of the nervous system regulation piece first, especially with people who are dealing with a brain injury, I think that's key. That's been huge for me. And just, okay.
That's beautiful. I can, for those that don't know me listening in, I've had a few concussions in my life. So I've had 7 concussions along the road, and I had 4 between 2018 and 2020. And the 2021 that really flipped things massively upside down. Like you say, you're like navigating, do I have a career? Can I drive? Family, friends, so many different things, along with what is physically going on in your body. But one thing I really had to wrestle with first and foremost, like you say, was that regulating, because it was so easy to, when I'm brain breaking to help support symptoms, to then wander off into, okay, well, what do I do next week or next month or next year? But then that just kind of perpetuated things, because my body wasn't actually getting an opportunity to relax in that moment and then set up for success, in the next hour of my day. So that was quite a mind muddle for me to learn how to pause, acknowledge, meet with compassion, but then also support my system. And it was good on reflection for me to learn, but it was so frustrating in the moment because I'd never had to do it so intentionally before. But it really did make such a difference to how I was able to show up navigating that peak of symptoms.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think it's key. And it's so easy for our brains to go to the fear of the future. And like, if I can't do this right now, how am I ever going to do anything? And like, just catastrophizing and going way far ahead, and rather than just being in this moment, taking care of you in this moment, which is hard to do. So yeah, it's so important, and such an important skill to learn, and so beautiful that you've learned it and can reflect back on it and see the difference it makes. So I think that will be very beneficial for the people that you work with as well, to see and hear that and know that you know from personal experience what it's like.
Definitely. And I feel like always that path of learning, right? But being able to tap into that in the moment is like such a muscle that's good to build. And then, like you say as well, I think being able to carry lived experience, whether it's directly relating or on a synergy, just brings an element of humanity to things that I know I really loved. I had one health professional in particular in my concussion rehabilitation who navigated chronic illness, and very different, but she could meet me with so much empathy, and she wasn't oversharing, but it was enough that I was like, oh, I feel heard, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It was really powerful.
Oh, that is so good. And I find myself having to take my own advice. Like it's funny because it's
yes.
easy to tell other people, like, I know this works. I've seen it. I've talked to people, like, I know it works. But then when I have to apply it to myself, I'm like, this is so hard. Like the like, it's okay to take a break. It's okay. You're like, speak nicely to yourself when you are in a place where you need to comfort yourself and take time for yourself. It can be so hard to actually do it. So it is, yeah, I think it's something that this was something that was important for me to learn, because again, I had that resistance to doing concussion coaching because I felt like it was so specific. I wasn't going to get to work with people on all these other things. But I had a friend point out, like, people with concussions are still human. They still have family relationship issues. They still have all these things. You're able, like, you can still apply these things that people are dealing with a concussion to everybody. Like, I think these principles that we teach are going to be helpful for everyone. They're just especially helpful with people who are trying to deal with a brain injury as well. So it's good information for everybody, and it's important to apply it and try to apply it myself as well. So yeah, I can feel it to some degree. I know it's not the same, but it's still a challenge sometimes.
Yeah. And I think that's also where, like, looking for those synergies and experience, because no one has lived my experience exactly like me. And it's the same goes for everyone. And so having that understanding that there can be commonalities without having to be exactly 100%, like, the same and still valid.
Yes. Yeah. So well said. Yes. Amen to that.
What is the thing you most love when it comes to coaching?
Goodness, that is, I don't even know how to answer that. It's funny because if I haven't coached for a little while and then I get to coach again, I'm it's almost like I forget sometimes. Like, I know I love coaching, but then I do it and I'm like, I love the connecting with people, and I love the opportunity to try to serve and help. And I feel like sometimes the things that come out of my mouth, I'm like, I know that wasn't from me. That was from a higher divine source that you needed to hear. Like, it was way more brilliant than I could have come up with. So it's really cool to feel like I get to be a part of that and almost like a witness to it. And just to see, I really love people, and I love the vulnerability. Like, when we're in a situation of coaching, like, we're both, people are open. They're like, this is hard for me. And so because of that rawness, that vulnerability, we can just dive in deep and really try to make a difference. And then to see the progress, and to sometimes just watch people, you can see it in them. They're like highly overcharged and like in that hyper aroused state where the fight or flight, and then to just see the piece come over, and I don't know, the aha moments. It's such a privilege to be a part of. And I learn so much from people. It's very inspiring to me to see what people deal with and overcome, and how their resilience and their fortitude and their faith and all of the things that help them is inspiring to me and helps me as well. So it's just, I don't know, it's a beautiful thing. I just really, really love it. And feeling that connection with people just really fills me up. So
it's an amazing space, eh? Like, in my coaching road, I feel like for me, something that really lights me up is where someone's sharing something as if it's like, oh, I just paced it out and, told myself this and nurtured myself with this or managed it with this. And you're thinking, yo, are you hearing yourself? You know, like 8 weeks ago, this is just that situation wouldn't have been feasible, or like the fact you're able to be in these scenarios and support yourself with these tools. And it's like just innate that to be able to implement and start reaching towards those goals is such a cool feeling when it just starts becoming kind of automatic for someone.
Yes, it is. It's the coolest. And seeing progress is so exciting. It is awesome.
The excitement that can come along with just seeing people do life, do what's important to them and bringing value just innately by being them.
Yes.
So special. That's really like cool to hear about your road and where it's taken you and how you impact, in the brain injury community nowadays. And I'm also really interested throughout this podcast so far, you've mentioned like family quite a few times and family being pivotal. So like, what does family look like for you? And how do you nurture that in and amongst all these other learnings and commitments that you've mentioned?
Yes, thank you. Family is so important to me. So I'll start back in the day. My childhood, I grew up in a state called Delaware, which is on the east coast of the US. And I grew up with 5 little brothers and wonderful parents. So I did a lot of babysitting growing up. I love my brothers. And now that most of them have gotten married and brought awesome girls into our family too. I love my sisters-in-law. I love my family. And then I have 6 kids with my husband now. And so we've got a 14-year-old all the way down to a 3-year-old at the moment. And they are the best, but they keep us so busy. And I really love family life. I had a really interesting opportunity recently through a friend that we met from living in our time in China. She arranged for me to speak to Chinese mothers about motherhood. And it was a really cool experience. I'm really grateful for it. But she asked me to explain what motherhood means to me. And it was kind of surprising to me how hard that was. I was like, I don't even know. Because I feel like in a sense, I had my little brothers that, again, I did a lot of babysitting for. My mom was a fantastic mother. She made me want to be a mom, but I did do a lot of babysitting. I almost feel like they were like my first go at motherhood. And now I'm doing it in my second round with my actual kids. I just feel I love my brothers. So and my kiddos, obviously, but it was funny to think about what does motherhood mean to me? I was like, it almost feels like asking a fish to describe the water that it swims in. It's like, that is my world. I don't know. It's hard for me to separate myself from it. And because of that, it has been, I've known that my family is my top most important responsibility. I just feel like it's the thing that matters most. And so knowing that has definitely influenced the career choices that I've made. I would have done things differently if OT or even now coaching, it was my main thing. I would do things differently. But yeah, it's been challenging sometimes because there's times where I'm like, oh, I just want to dive in all the way and do this thing. But then I'm like, oh, but I need to be taking care of my family. That's more important. It feels like a tug of war sometimes. But I wouldn't trade any of this for anything. I really love the family thing. It's very important to me. And I want to share something that was very helpful for me in this idea of trying to balance all of the things. And I think I might have shared this on the podcast before. I don't know, but I'm going to share it again just because it was so impactful for me. But I remember thinking throughout my life, you always hear about people talking about balancing life, finding balance in life and all of the things that, you're juggling, finding a way to balance it. And because of that, I think I just imagined that there would come a time where I would achieve balance. I would get it. I would have the family stuff figured out and the work stuff figured out and the church stuff figured out and the self-care and all of the things. I would get it. I would have it all perfectly poised, all of the balls in the air, exactly where they're supposed to be all the time. And I would achieve balance. And it was, apparently I'm a slow learner because it took me a really long time to figure out that is never going to happen. It's just not, I don't think it's possible. I don't think it would even be healthy, to be honest, because there's always going to be things that are pulling stronger in one direction or another. And I was doing a continuing education course on physical balance and through Z Health, which is really cool. If anybody's interested, they should check it out. Really fascinating brain-based therapy kind of stuff. Really cool. Z Health. Anyway, I was listening to the instructor, Eric Cobb talking about balance, and he said that physical balance is about recovery. And he explained, you can stand on one foot and that's great. That's good balance. But what matters is if someone comes over and bumps into you, can you right yourself? And I had to pause the video and wrote it down. I was like, balance is about recovery, because it just dawned on me. This is a life lesson for me, because you can have all the things going on, but what matters is how do you recover when you get pushed or pulled too far in one direction, and to realize that it is a flow. Sometimes you're going to spend more time on work things, and then there's going to be times where you correct that and overcorrect it and spend quote unquote too much time on the family things or whatever. There's a constant back and forth, and it's a flow, and it's supposed to be, and that's what balance is about. It's about that back and forth and that recovery. And if you think about it, even a ballerina on her toes, that looks perfectly poised and still, she is constantly, there's micro adjustments happening all the time. She's leaning too far one way and back the other, and it's a constant movement. And we are living human beings, that it's never going to be static. And so that was very freeing to me to realize, especially with trying to run a business or put the content out there and drive the kids all the places that they need to be and try to do all the things for them. And just to realize it's okay. We're going to lean too far one way, and it's okay. That was very freeing for me and helpful in all of this.
What a beautiful analogy. How do you feel like your awareness and implementation of that is when you kind of first heard that analogy, and then nowadays having time to practice it? Because sometimes I find it can be a lot easier to think about the general principle, and then in the moment to beat yourself up or to be like, oh, dang it, I'm not holding this and this where I wanted to.
Yeah, that's a really good point and a good question. I think, honestly, though, just having, again, the power of our thoughts, the realization of it was quite significant for me. And there are still times where I definitely feel okay, I feel it. I feel like I've moved too far this way, but just knowing that it's okay, and that just means I'm going to be probably swinging too far the other way soon. It takes off this pressure and guilt and all of the stuff. It really has made a really big difference. I would say I definitely there are times where I feel oh man, I haven't spent as much time as I'd like to with individual kiddos, or my house is a disaster, and it has been for a very long time. There's things, there's always going to be things. And so I'm figuring it out, but it is, it's a constant flow, and just remembering that general idea really has lifted a lot of the guilt and pressure off of my shoulders, which has been nice. So, yeah. Because
I think often we do easily put that expectation on ourselves, oh, I should have this figured out by now, or when I'm this time, when I'm this age, I'll have every single category weighed out perfectly by the gram, perfectly balanced, health, fitness, self-care, family.
Yes.
But the beauty in humanity is kind of the messiness, and sometimes that chaotic energy can be a lot in the moment, but it's also, it's just the magic of being a human and getting to live a life that's fully lived.
Yes, it is. It's so good. Your comment about chaos just reminded me, it was really funny. One time we had my youngest brother over for dinner, and my kids are young, and dinner is loud and crazy, and it's just always crazy. And my brother was I remember him looking up at my husband and me and just being what is happening? He's this is crazy. There's so much chaos. And I was yeah. I was this is exactly what it was like growing up at our house. And then it dawned on me that he was the youngest. He was one of the ones creating the chaos. And it was oh my gosh, we had such different childhoods. It was such a funny thing to me to realize, we grew up in the same household. I knew that this was how it is with big families, but you're not used to it. And it was funny. But
yeah, which is such a cool observation and insight to have, because like you say, because he would have been the younger one, everyone else would have been calmer than him. So
yes, it was just funny.
It will take. But did you find I asked this because a few months ago I walked into a friend's family gathering, which was lovely, and they had one of the brothers of them has 3 wee children, which are gorgeous. And I walked in and there's this 2-year-old that runs up to me in like this ballerina tutu, puts her arms up to be held. I was like, oh, hello, nice to meet you. Like, you know, 3-month-old baby crying in the background, a 4-year-old running around. And the parents were just so chill the whole evening. Like, they just did this amazing juggle of all of the children's needs. And I loved it, but I was also exhausted, just mentally keeping tabs and supporting whatever child happened to come up to me. And I remember asking them, I was like, how are you so calm? It seems like I'm walking the park for you. And their comment was like, oh, when you add one, you know, you just adapt to the chaos kind of incrementally. This is just our normal. Do you feel like with your kids it was sort of similar?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's and everyone, like, it just, you get to a point where it's just like, what's one more chaos creator in the I don't know. It is funny. And I think there is a point too, I don't know, of like, yeah, they wear you down to a point where you're like, okay, whatever. Like, you know, we're giving up on this thing. Or I don't know. It's a funny thing. And I think personalities also, like the personality you come into it with makes a difference. My aunt made the comment that I thought was funny and cute and accurate. She was like, Thane, that's my husband, Thane likes his ducks in a row, and Bethany likes her ducks at the park. I was like, that's true. I would much rather like not have to deal with trying to keep them in line and doing all the things and being super structured. Like, let's go just play. So I think in some ways that's easier, but then Thane is also really good. Like when he was doing more of when I was working full time and he was more of the at-home parent, I was like, you are so much better at running our household than I am. So everybody has their strengths and their weaknesses that they bring in. It's sometimes you handle the chaos better than others, and it's a learning process. But it has definitely given me a lot of empathy for people dealing with a concussion with children, because kids are very demanding. But I do tell people, like, your kids are going to be your best therapists. They're going to give you all of the sensory overload experience that you need to learn how to deal with sensory things. And they're also very good at being in the moment. And so you can learn from them how to be more mindful. So there's definitely positive things, but I can't even imagine sometimes how challenging it would be. But
yeah. I'm always in awe because I have the luxury at this stage of my life navigating my brain injuries to be able to pause when I need to. And yeah, there's different things that pull in different commitments, but at the end of the day, if push comes to shove, I can just send an email off or a quick phone call and be like, look, I'm really sorry, but this is where I'm at today. But it's different, I think, when you have a little human that's dependent on you. And I just feel like I just really like celebrate and acknowledge those that navigate. I really feel like the term brain injury warrior for parents that navigate brain injury is just massive. Yeah.
Yes. Amen to that. And I hope and pray for all of them that are out there that they get some good support through it, because having somebody who can maybe watch the kids for you or do something like that makes a really big difference. And I think that's something that might be helpful for, people who are trying to support someone with a brain injury to know, like, hey, that could be very meaningful for someone to be able to have a chance to take some time. So
yeah, your village, right?
Yes.
And I mean, even without brain injury, I imagine there's times as a parent that perhaps overwhelm kicks in. So how do you and your husband support yourselves in that?
Fortunately, I feel like we generally take turns with our overwhelm. So one of us somebody's able to handle things at least for a little bit while the other one has their little breakdown. But it's funny. I don't know why it took me so long, but just recently, I talk with patients all the time about creating a gauge system, like a way to communicate to your loved ones, like, okay, quickly, without going in and trying to describe all of the things you're feeling, just being like, I'm in the red zone right now, or like, I'm at a 10, I'm at an 8 or whatever. Like, we just barely started implementing that with our family. So like, hey, I noticed, how are you doing? And they're like, I'm at about a 6 right now. So it can be helpful communication wise for that. But yeah, I mean, the overwhelm definitely happens. And I think that's where, and as I'm talking about this, I'm thinking about one of my sisters-in-law talks about feeling overwhelmed a lot. And I think it's like, whether you had a brain injury or not, there's a lot of sensory overstimulation that happens, especially with children. And so, again, the understanding of the nervous system and regulation and the tricks to the awareness of it, and then knowing things that you can do to help calm the system are really important. Even if you can, step aside and like go to the bathroom before your kids make it in there, before you shut the door, so that you can like block them out. Like try to do that. when one of my kiddos was like 3 or 4, he was in the bathroom with me, and I was like, "Can I just have some privacy, please?" And he was like, "You can do that with people, right?" I was like, "No, the point of privacy is that I'm alone. Go away, child." So
I love you, and right now I need some space.
Yes, exactly. So learning how to figure out how to get that is important sometimes. But
yeah. But like phenomenal how you're able to, juggle it all.
There are moments. Don't worry. There's a lot of, but it is. I think honestly too. I think there's a lot of sustaining that happens from a higher power for me as well. I feel like that's key for me. I draw on that strength and need it a lot. And and so I feel like, and sometimes I'm like, why do it's very rare that this thought comes up, because usually I'm just like, I love this. This is the best. I love all the things that I'm doing. Sometimes I'm like, why do I do this to myself? Like, there's so much going on. Like, I don't have to do all of these things. But then I'm like, I don't want to not do that. I love getting to do that, do everything. And also recognizing that there are times and seasons. And that's important for me to remember too, is like, this is a time and a season where these are my priorities. This is where I need to focus. And later I will get to have more time to do these other things. And so I think that can be helpful with the overwhelm piece. And then just recognizing that sometimes it's okay to not be okay, and to try to apply to myself the things that I tell my clients all the time, like allowing yourself to feel all the feelings, and that negative emotions are not bad or to be like resisted or avoided. We just need to allow them. So it's all crazy, but it's all good. And it's, I do feel like that higher power makes a huge difference for me in helping me be guided in all of this to where I'm at, and also just in the day to day, because I need it. I couldn't do it alone. I can tell you that right now. So
that beautiful chaos.
Yes. I try to embrace the chaos. It's like my motto: embrace chaos. We got this.
And often as well, like for me, when I'm in moments where I'm like, oh my gosh, I always try to think of myself at like 90 years old in a retirement home, and kind of thinking, will this be something I reflect on at that point? Will it be something I really treasure putting energy into? Or will I wish I put energy into something that was more aligned to me? And I find that can be quite helpful for me to just be like, oh, this literally doesn't matter, like as in, oh, it's a test or it's an exam, like you have got this, it's fine, but also let's enjoy the day as well. Or actually showing up for this person that's really important to me is a lot of energy right now, but this is something I'll look back on with gratitude. So I'm going to kind of put that energy in.
Yes,
it's a nice way for me to be able to put it into perspective, rather than sitting in the moment of, I have 20 things on my to-do list, but I don't know where to start.
Yes. I like that a lot. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's something I need to implement myself, because it does, the to-do list can feel completely overwhelming sometimes. And pulling back and looking at that bigger picture to see what really matters is important, and is easier said than done, but it definitely can make a big difference.
100%. And also like dance parties. Personally, I love a dance party. Before this podcast, I had a dance party because it's just a vibe,
I love that. That's fantastic. Yes, dance parties, especially with little ones. For me, it's funny. My mom is a dancer. She like majored in dance and just loves dance. But she didn't, I didn't do dance. She taught me ballet when I was like 4, and then she got mono and was laid up on the couch for a really long time, and like never went back to that. And so I never, like, dancing feels less than comfortable for me. But when I do a dance party with kids and I don't care what I look like, then it's great. So that's that. I can feel that. But
I can tell you my dancing isn't. It's not something you'd want to put on a stage. Let me put it that way. Like, it's messy. There's lots of arm movements, but it's fun. So
that is what matters. I love
Yeah,
it.
it's energizing. One final question that I was curious about, just sort of linking back to your time in China, I guess two questions is, how did you find parenting in a completely different country where the main language is not your native language? And did it shape what motherhood looks like to you, seeing how another culture mothers?
Ooh, that is such an interesting question. Yeah. So my oldest was 2 when we moved there. I had a 2-year-old and a 3-month-old when we moved over there. So
Wow.
parenting was fairly new to me just in general. um, and so being over there was, I think, the things that I found super challenging, definitely not being able to read the signs around me or like and speak to people. I had actually taken 2 semesters of Mandarin when I was in college, but I did not. Yeah, I was definitely not able to communicate easily with people. So it was challenging in that way, but it was also, I think, just living in a big city, which isn't an experience that I had before. So trying to get around, a lot of times cab drivers didn't want to stop for us because they didn't want to deal with probably with babies and with the car seat or the stroller, things like that. So some of it was just big city life that was challenging for me, that I think would have been challenging anywhere. But then the added, whole different culture thing was challenging. There were a lot of things that were really hard, but there were a lot of things that were just such a cool experience. I'm so grateful that we got to have that experience over there. As far as how it's impacted my parenting, again, I guess it just, because it was so different and I was still such a young mom, I don't know that I have ever thought about how it impacted that. It did make me realize how much proximity influences how, like, the connections you're able to make with other people. Like, it was so much easier to get to know people and have play dates and do the things that if you were closer by than if you had to travel a long ways. And I think that's true even no matter where you live. It's just those are the people that influence you, and you can get to know better the people that you're close to, which can impact the way that you parent and like who you have access to, things like that. As far as mothering and observing other cultures, it was really interesting. There's just one thing that particularly comes to mind. I remember hearing sometimes some of the other people that I knew. Most of my interactions were with like other expats, other people that I could actually talk to, so it was easier. So, but I remember hearing some people talk about how they would get really annoyed by the like old Chinese ladies telling them that like you have to do this, you have to like make sure your kids are more bundled and doing all this stuff. But my husband pointed out, and I had this experience once. I think a lady, I don't even remember if this was my experience or somebody that I heard, but that they told them that they had to have socks on their baby, like they didn't have socks or they didn't have shoes or something, and the person was giving them a hard time about that, or like trying to like point it out. And again, it's hard to communicate. Like, you don't always necessarily even know what they're saying. But my husband pointed out, like, these are, like older women who have probably experienced the loss of a child because of not having enough clothing for the baby or whatever. Like there's things that they might have experienced that is influencing and I always saw it as a loving gesture. Like they were trying to be helpful. I think sometimes people who didn't see it that way were annoyed by it. But for the most part, when I observed it, it was like, I was just grateful. Like, oh, that's so kind. And I appreciate that. And like, I see where I'm coming from, but I can kind of see where you're coming from. And so like, I'm grateful for that. But yeah, it was interesting to observe just the difference in cultural, like how people do parenting and life differently. It's fascinating and just really beautiful though. Again, when I did that thing with the Chinese mothers recently, the video call with them, it just hit me again. Like, parents love their children, like families are so important. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. Like it's a really beautiful thing. And we have different ways of approaching things. And I don't know. It's a beautiful thing. I think humanity is raw and messy and and beautiful at the same time. And love is the answer for everything. I don't know. It's cool to see how other people show love, again, to strangers, trying to help them make sure their babies survive, and also to the families, even in ways that I don't necessarily see as like being particularly helpful to have like multiple adults around one kid constantly. Like, I don't know. It's different. It's very different, but I think it all comes from love. And that's what's really important. So
Yeah, that's beautiful. The fact that love can be expressed in so many ways and that different doesn't necessarily mean less valuable, which is sort of one thing for me I love about travel or learning different cultures is it makes me sit back on things that I just are automatic to me or it's just the way it is, and I go, oh, okay, it's not just it's how we do it, and that's cool. But getting invited to see how others do it, one that hit me was, or struck me around that, was in Taiwan, like retirement. So at least in New Zealand, and I think typically Western cultures, generally my perception is the older you get, the more isolated life can become. And, a lot of people end up in retirement homes and can be quite isolated. And in Taiwan, what I saw every morning at 7:30, there was like hordes of people that in New Zealand would probably be in a retirement home and they'd be doing karaoke, Tai Chi, dancing, yoga. And they were so warm and friendly. And when I approached them with my Google Translate, could I join in this karaoke group of aunts and uncles, adopted me, and I got to learn a bit through Google Translate of what they do, and the mornings that I would go and see them. And it was really gorgeous just watching their interactions, where it was this time of just connection, as if you were just sitting in a friend's lounge but outside with karaoke. And what are you doing today? Oh, I'm going to the supermarket. And then they'd have 3 or 4 of them spontaneously go to the supermarket, at like 85, 90. And I just thought, that's so cool. There's so much connection going on here, which I don't think happens as naturally where I'm from.
Yeah.
And I didn't even think it never thought to me to do it any differently. So
right?
that can be quite nice as well, just to challenge.
Yes. No, that's so beautiful. Yes. And it is so cool to see that. I remember walking through the park once and seeing this guy. He looked like he was in his 90s, and he was like touching his toes and like bent completely in half, like more so than I could be. And I was at that time, I had like worked with a lot of people in skilled nursing facilities, like, 70-year-olds that couldn't do nearly what he was doing. I was like, that is amazing. So yeah, it's impressive.
Phenomenal. We got, from my karaoke group, the Kung Fu group invited me to do a session with them. And it was run by a 97-year-old gentleman. And my arms were so sore and I wanted to give in. But as a 27-year-old at the time, I'm like, this man's got 70 years on me. I can't stop this.
70 years on you.
Mind boggled. But again, the care and the intentional showing up every day and intentional movement, slow and steady, at least in that Kung Fu group, you just saw it in how they moved and how they were and their being.
Yeah,
it's just phenomenal.
I love that. That sense of community. I love that you joined the karaoke group. But yeah, that consistent daily effort over time, it is astounding what can happen from that. There's a lot of lessons to be learned from it.
And one thing that popped up around, so for me with the karaoke group, I'm trying to do karaoke in Mandarin. I don't speak Mandarin, I don't read Mandarin, but I tried. But I also wonder, with you being in China for a year, has that helped at all, or have you reflected on, if you're working with concussion clients with aphasia who maybe struggle with comprehension or speaking or reading or writing, does that year of being in somewhere with a completely different language connect for you at all?
That is such a good question. And actually, it hadn't until recently. I was doing an interview with a speech language pathologist who I know from working at Cognitive Effects, and she's learned multiple languages, and she talked about how she's made that connection. And when she said this, it clicked for me. I was like, oh my gosh, yes. Because she talked about if you don't know the word for it, you talk around it and you try to describe it and all of that. And I was like, yes, I can get that now. I could totally, this is very eye-opening to me. So I am ashamed to say I have not until that moment made that connection, but yes, I can see it now. It
was normal for you. So sometimes it does take someone else to pull it forward. But again, to me, it highlights the fact we don't have to walk the exact same path to have some synergies of understanding and connection.
Yes. So well said. Yes, absolutely.
This was so fun. I was so excited to learn more about you. And I have to say, it did not disappoint. You have just had so many different different interesting paths, yet also intertwined with a similar theme of care, connection, family, and love. So just thank you for sharing so openly and so passionately. And before we wrap up here, is there anything else that you would just like to, I don't know, that feels on your heart that you want to share?
I love you so much. You're so sweet. And thank you so much for doing this. I'm grateful for the chance, because it's funny, I have throughout all of the things that I've done, like the mission that I did, the occupational therapy, all of these things, the life coaching, in my training and things, I hear people, the feedback that I get consistently is be more confident, show up more confidently. And it's funny because I don't know, when I talk about this, like when I talk about coaching and concussions and all of this stuff, it's very easy for me to just have that passion come out. And so I appreciate an opportunity to let that, put it out there. I do really love what I get to do, and love the connections and the people that I've gotten to meet through this. I'm so inspired by so many people. Yeah. I don't know. There's just life is beautiful. Hope is there. I think that's, again, the point of the podcast here is to try to spread that hope and that light. I just feel like, accessing light and finding hope and peace are so important, and it is possible. And I hope that people know that and feel that. And if they can't access it right now, I hope they can feel it from me right now. And then I might need to feel it from them later, because I have moments too. So it's okay. It's okay to be wherever you are, but just know that there's goodness and light available. And I think that's kind of the main message that I hope to put out there into the world. So thanks for asking that, and for doing this. You're awesome. I appreciate it very much.
Oh, this was fun. I love jamming. And I think as well, when you're talking about confidence, to me, confidence falls empty without authenticity. And what emanates from you in, I'm trying to think of the words. I was going to say in uber amounts.
Abundance? Is that the word we're going for?
It's the sentiment. Speaking of aphasia, what emanates from you massively is that authenticity. And I think that is so important and so special. And I can hear in a lot of what you're saying, those small moments, those little moments. And I think they're so important, because, there are rainy days in life sometimes, but even just racing those raindrops down the window, that might be what joy looks like in that moment. But just being able to find something to focus on and hold on to. And you give a lot of value. So thank you for just being you and showing up.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
I'm so glad you listened in today. I hope you have gained some helpful insights and inspiration regarding dealing with and recovering from concussions. My goal is to create more awareness and education about concussions and the fact that there is so much that can be done to improve life after someone has had one. Help me spread the message by liking, commenting, rating, and subscribing to this podcast, and share it with others who would benefit from hearing it. There are more resources available on my website. And again, if you or someone you love would benefit from concussion coaching, sign up for a free consultation using the link in the show notes or at my website, www.theconcussioncoach.com. Thank you. See you next time, and take good care of that amazing brain of yours.